Across Australia for your drive home this afternoon, it's Carrie Bickmore and Tommy Little.
Well, if you feel like you have a broken brain, you are not alone. Jamila Rizvi and Rosie Waterland feel the same as well. They've written a book called Broken Brains. It is available now in all good bookstores. I was going to explain it, but let's get one half of the duo to explain it herself. Jamila Rizvi joins us now. Welcome.
Hey. Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
So, how is your brain broken?
Whose brain?
Are both
is more
brains broken?
How broken?
And how?
So Rosie and I are good mates. We've been mates for over 10 years now. She had a pretty rough childhood with parents who were drug addicts and who were not able to look after her and her sisters the way they needed to be. And she lives with PTSD and complex trauma as a result. So she's got the mental health broken brain. Mm-hmm. And then, you know this well, Carrie, because you were one of the first people I called. About 7 years ago, I was very unexpectedly diagnosed with a rare kind of brain tumour. So I've got the physically broken brain.
Which I'm guessing leads to a bit of a mental broken brain at times as well due to the physicality of
It's amazing how the two go back and forth.
So the term broken
Yeah.
implies that it can't be fixed or even that it's bad. And even when you talk about Rosie and her upbringing, obviously it's not ideal for any child, and you wouldn't want that on any kid. But the result is a incredible woman with an amazing and unique perspective on life, who's very articulate and can make people feel things through the things she writes. Is it broken?
One of the reasons I liked the word broken is that one of the most common questions I get now, including from friends, people I haven't seen in a while, is they go, "Are you better now?" And it's because they maybe haven't heard from me in a while or maybe haven't even seen me since I was unwell, but they've seen it in the media, and it's asked with the best of intentions. They really want me to say, yeah, I'm all fixed. Like I've come through the darkness of the brain tumours and the surgeries and the radiation and all the treatment, and now I'm fixed. And I'm not. You know, the reality is that when people cut open your head multiple times, there's damage that's done. It's damage that has to be done. It's not like anyone made a mistake, but that leaves a brain injury. And for me, those brain injuries are quite significant, and they're not going to be fixed in my lifetime. I hope in someone else's lifetime they've got cures and treatments for all of that. But for me, I'm not going to be fixed. And I think for Rosie, that's something she's also had to come to terms with, that she has to learn to manage her mental ill health, not cure it, because a cure is not going to happen.
Can I ask you, just for people who may not know your full story, before we get to how you're going now and some of the implications of your diagnosis to begin with, can you talk a little bit about what you were diagnosed with, where it was on the brain, and sort of what that initial period of time is like? Because I'm guessing you talk about that in the book, yeah?
So I have a craniopharyngioma, which means I had to learn to spell it when I was diagnosed, as well as learn what it was. It's a quite unusual type of brain tumour. It happens to about 1 in every 1.5 million people. You're born with it, but you wouldn't be able to see it on an MRI when you're born. It's a tiny cluster of cells that are extra bit of DNA that I shouldn't have had.
You're born with it?
Yeah. So it's a little cluster of cells that grows off the stalk of the pituitary gland. So if you think about the brain, and at the bottom of the brain is the pituitary, that's where all your hormones are. The bit that connects the pituitary to your brain is where my tumour grows. For most people, it starts growing when they're kids. For me, for some reason, it didn't. And the growth started happening somewhere around my late 20s. So for me, it was very much out of the blue.
How did you know that you had it?
Well, because of where it grows and the complexity of the brain, for me, it began with hormones. So I just skipped a period. And would have been 7 years ago now, I skipped a period. I was on a book tour, actually, at the time, and I thought, oh, I'm stressed. I must be really stressed by the book tour. And then it happened again. And so I was very diligent, went and saw my GP. And I think that's when I got lucky the first time, because I think a lot of GPs would have gone.
A couple of skipped periods.
Young woman with a 2-year-old at home, you know, just finished breastfeeding. Your hormones are a bit weird, mate. It'll be fine. But she took me really seriously and got blood tests done, sent me off to specialists. And then a gynecologist found my brain tumour on a scan.
So when you got diagnosed, and I remember seeing you very shortly after you were diagnosed, and everything that comes with that, the whirlwind that is the fear and the anticipation, what was some of those early days and months like for you? Obviously, we're sitting in front of you now and you seem happy and positive, but the person I saw on the day you were diagnosed was the complete opposite of that. What was that period of time like?
I think you might have seen us at the single worst point, like literally that evening. It was about 4 days, I think, after I'd been diagnosed, and my husband and I had just seen a neurosurgeon for the first time, and we'd had to wait a few days to see a neurosurgeon. And the person we saw didn't have the bedside manner I think you would have hoped for someone in that situation. We waited for about an hour and a half, and when we went in, he said, "Oh, you're young people. Well, you've probably Googled everything already, so why don't you just ask me questions?" And like we'd been waiting for 4 days wondering if I was going to survive because a gynecologist had found this thing. She couldn't help me. We had all the questions in the world. We'd been trying not to Google because we thought that was what you weren't supposed to do. And he really scared us.
Jamila, can I ask a potentially invasive question? So don't answer it if you don't want to. But how does a gyno then go to scanning your brain?
Yeah, so she was essentially trying to rule things out. She was like, okay, well, I had almost no estrogen, which didn't make sense because I didn't have the other signs of early menopause or anything like that. And so one of the things they check, along with a whole bunch of other things, is they rule out that there's something going on with the part of your brain that produces all the hormones.
Right. So is that then an MRI?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So then you see this guy and you go in and you didn't connect with him.
No.
But at that point, I'm assuming having been on this journey before, you're not going to start shopping around.
Do you know what? It didn't even occur to me.
I know, of course.
It genuinely, and I feel silly saying that, it didn't occur to me.
No, I don't think it would occur to a lot of people.
To see someone else.
No.
I don't know. Okay, again, I feel silly saying this now. I don't think I would have known where to start. Like, where do you find a neurosurgeon?
I know.
But also,
and get into them quickly.
And how do you Google good?
A good one. Yeah, I'd like a good one, please.
Yeah.
But that night, I remember we got home and I started talking to Jeremy, my husband, about what this was going to mean for him. And the first few days we'd been exclusively focused on me. And talking to him about that meant that we had to canvass the prospect of what would happen if I didn't survive. And I had this realisation of, he's going through something quite different to me. Like we're going through this together, but what he's going through is different because he's thinking about a future where if the worst happens, he has to keep living, as opposed to me, who was imagining what would happen if I didn't get to. And so I called Carrie and said, you'd never met Jeremy at that point, and said, would you be okay if I introduced you? I think he needs to talk to someone who might understand. And it surprised no one that Carrie showed up on our doorstep about 15 minutes later. Probably broke some speeding records, I reckon.
I know.
That's how quickly you got there.
Poor Jeremy, I don't think he was necessarily in the headspace to receive a random person he'd never met in his lounge room. I always think back to that day and just think how much that would have been for him, just having some stranger in his living room.
I think it was the best thing that happened to us. We were definitely at our worst. And you were very kind and sort of supported us through the headspace that we were in, and you called Jeremy after you left and said, I don't know if this is my place, but I think you should see a different surgeon. And you made the introduction to the neurosurgeon who then operated on me twice and unquestionably saved my life the second time. Like another surgeon wouldn't have been able to do that surgery.
I remember when I spoke to him on the phone, and again, we can edit this bit out if it's too personal because it's obviously not his story, it's yours, but he didn't want to hear the idea of another surgeon and he felt very confident in the one that you had. And I think that's, again, because there's so many overwhelming things going on. When you've got one thing locked in, we've already got the surgeon. Please don't add another complication. We got that bit down. Yeah. And I said to him, like, it was quite an uncomfortable conversation. And then he then did call back. He did call that surgeon. It was late at night. And then he called back afterwards and he said, I'm so thankful I called that surgeon. And I think he said to me months later that, he apologised. And I said, you don't have to apologise. Like, we all show up when we're under pressure and in intense grief in different ways. But that was one of those calls that I almost didn't make because I thought, I'm overstepping here. I don't actually know. My gut was telling me, but also I don't know, Jeremy. And what if this means then that he shuts me out and doesn't allow me to communicate with you? Because there was so much going on. And I'm so thankful that the surgeon was able to help you because he was amazing at the time and he knew how to, as you found out, he knew what to do.
Yeah. And I think I suspect in that moment, Jez was trying to give me as much certainty as I could have in an uncertain time. And so it was like, we've met this person.
Of course.
That person's the person. We're not disrupting anything.
It's also time, right? As in, like, you're in a state of panic and a state of shock. So even the idea of changing something which may be better prolongs it. And so you're like, no, we don't have time to, for want of a better word, around.
Yeah, 100%.
So what he then was able to remove the tumour, and what is obviously that period of time was incredibly challenging as well, because where it was is very hard to operate on.
Yeah. So the first time he went up through my nose to get to the base of my brain, that was the sort of the most direct route to get there, which I remember at the time being like, but you won't be able to see it. Like,
of course.
Just that lack of understanding of, like.
That's the first thing I thought, as you said it right
I'd
then.
only ever been to a hospital to have a baby.
I'm like, sure, you cut me open from the back or something.
There's got to be a zip somewhere, right? It's not my nose. But no, they put video cameras and all the instruments up your nose to be able to access the base of your brain. And they were able to remove a big chunk of the tumour. They deliberately chose to leave some because of where it was adhered to, including my optic chiasm, which would have meant I was blind if they cut all of that out.
They keep you awake?
No, didn't have to be awake for me. Just depends on the kind of tumour, really. Sure. And then I think it was 3 or 4 months later, we had a big party. We had a big RuPaul's Drag Race themed party to celebrate my tumour sashaying away, and we bought a house. And another month after that, we moved into that house, and we moved in on the Saturday, and on the Monday they told me it had grown back.
And then what could they do to it at that point?
So we went again. And that time I had a craniotomy, so the zip option.
Yeah. About time.
Yeah, exactly. Why did we do that the first time, guys? Which was a much more dangerous and much more invasive surgery than the first one. And they had to be a lot more aggressive than they were the first time. And I think, to be honest, it was probably toughest on Jeremy and my family, that one more so than me, because when I came out of the surgery, they thought I'd lost all my eyesight. And so they told Jeremy and Mim, my sister, you need to get ready and figure out what you're going to say to her. Because
when you say they thought, so this is before you were awake?
Yeah, so they thought I was blind.
Don't they, it will sound like a really stupid and insensitive question, but don't they wait till you wake up and tell them you can't see?
They could, but what would happen if I woke up and I couldn't see?
Oh, sure.
Like, it'd just be total panic, right?
They're just giving him a heads up.
So they were being told, you need to figure out what you're going to say to her. And my sister says she burst into tears and went into sheer panic, and Jeremy said nothing and started Googling things on his phone, like where to learn to read Braille. He went into full, she's going to want to know how she's going to read mode. And so I woke up and I'd lost a decent chunk of my eyesight, but I could see. And I apparently said, Jez, I can't see properly. But the fact that I knew it was him meant clearly I could see him.
So he's learnt Braille for nothing.
I know, it was a waste of a few hours. Absolute waste. And that one was that was a really tough recovery. Yeah, the next 4 or 5 months was really pretty grim.
And what made that part grim? Was it just because the eyesight's come back a lot?
Yeah. The eyesight has come back a lot. Like, I can drive now, thank goodness. It was physically demanding in a way I couldn't have imagined, I think. I went into that first surgery, I think I ran 10 Ks 2 days before I went into the first surgery. Like, I felt well. And I was fit and healthy, whereas the second one, I was coming off a recovery from a brain surgery, going into a second one, and it did a lot of damage. I lost a lot of hormone function. I don't produce cortisol anymore, which everyone talks about in relation to your cortisol levels going up when you're stressed, and that's bad. But you want some cortisol levels, because if you don't have any, you are dead. So I now have to replace my cortisol. My body doesn't know how to make the antidiuretic hormone, which is the one that turns the water you drink into urine and processes that through your body. I don't make growth hormone, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. Like I just started losing all of them over the next couple of years.
I remember seeing you around that time, and you were, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, at some point your nose got broken.
Yeah.
Was that by Rafi?
Oh.
No.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, not by him, but
it was. It was my son. No, after the first surgery through my nose was kind of weak, and then my son flew Spider-Man into my nose.
So then you had...
So it was him. But he feels really bad.
Oh, sweetheart.
Is that why you paused then go?
I was like, oh.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was.
So then
I'm not covering for
you talked about you had to have a nose job to fix that.
Yeah, I had to have a nose reconstruction.
But what I thought was interesting, I remember you talking about how you battled with that idea in your head because you were like, I've got bigger fish to fry than what my nose looks like. I should be thankful that I'm here and that I have a nose. Who cares? But your brain was still like, but I'd like my nose back the way it was. And for you, that was an internal battle about whether you should even get a nose job. Yeah,
I really struggled. I waited probably 18 months after it broke to fix it. And I looked like a boxer. Like it really, really was broken. And I think I felt like I was being vain or something. You know, that like I was one of the things people say to you when you've been really unwell is, oh, well, but you wouldn't sweat the small stuff anymore. I sweat all the small stuff. I'm always sweating small things.
Also,
and your nose is a big deal, right? I was going
to say, when you say sweat the small stuff.
It's the middle of your face.
If your nose has been smashed over your face, like that's what you look at.
Also,
you're allowed
if you've been
to
through what you've been through, you can care about absolutely anything you like.
Yeah, but I did. I forgot. I did have a real. Yeah, it took a good few months to kind of come to terms with it. And then I remember I went and saw 3 different, plastic surgeons who could do the nose reconstruction, and the one I liked best was the most expensive. Because by then I'd learned you should shop around with your doctors. But the one I wanted was the really expensive one. And I was like, oh, God, we've had so many medical bills and it's so expensive and all this time off work. And I remember running it by Jeremy and he was like, I feel like you don't get a bargain with your face.
No, I think that's good on you, Jeremy.
Go the good
one. So you talk about in your book, which surprised me to read, about your battle with an eating disorder as a result. Is that due to all of those hormones being shot and going, or is it?
Well,
what sparked
partly,
that?
I think. Right. I think it's related rather than causation. So one of the conditions I now live with is a condition called hypothalamic obesity. Your hypothalamus is a part of the brain. It's towards the base, right near where my tumour grows and where the radiation hit. And your hypothalamus is responsible for a whole bunch of things, very important part of the brain, but it regulates your hunger and thirst mechanisms and also how quickly you metabolize food. And mine just is faulty. Like it just doesn't work anymore since the radiation. And so a lot of people who have this kind of tumour have this experience, and it's quite common for people with my kind of tumour to die of a heart attack because you gain a whole lot of weight when you've got uncontrollable hunger, and then when you do eat, your body doesn't know what to do with it because it can't metabolize properly. You just gain weight without – I felt like for a good few years I would look at food and gain weight. And I think it began as a deliberate, careful, I need to be really cautious about the way I eat, and I need to be following a strict diet for this physical medical problem that I've got that is unusual and there's no medication for it. And it sort of evolved, I think. I think I began being more and more and more obsessive and controlling about food. And I sort of, in trying to be a very good girl and follow the doctor's orders, I think I kind of thought my way into an eating disorder.
Could your family or could Jeremy see what was happening?
They definitely knew something was going on. I don't think any of us talked about it as an eating disorder until one of my doctors did sometime down the track. But they could tell because I was not eating in a way that was healthy. And I think there's no question I was malnourished during the time, except the confusion was I was gaining.
You didn't look
I was still gaining weight.
Yeah. So how did you overcome that?
A lot of therapy. Wow. I had an enormous amount of therapy and worked with some eating disorder specialists who were Health at Any Size specialists who really supported me and helped me find a way to see that there was a version of life where I could be healthy even if I didn't look the way I thought healthy looked. and were incredibly supportive, and a great exercise physiologist as well, who was really good at looking at exercise as medicine and talking about how lifting weights and running and different types of exercise can actually be medical. They can be a part of your treatment. And then just in the last year or so, I have been really fortunate to be able to access a medicine that's still very hard to access, which is not specifically for the damage that's been done to my brain, but is adjacent to it, and is essentially able to regulate what was going wrong before. And to be honest, it's the family of the Ozempic type drugs, right?
Is it right?
It is the enormous amounts of research that are going on all over the world, because everyone wants to be the one that finds the next Ozempic, because that's a ticket to a lot of money. And so there are medical trials being done with people like me, because you can get the funding to help kids with brain tumours like this one to regulate their food. I feel a bit uncomfortable about that sometimes, that the weight loss industry is going to progress because they're trying to. That's the only reason anyone's paying attention to this kind of tumour. But you know what? I'm just going to take the win.
I mean, everything's grey, right? Like there's good and bad to it.
There's good and bad to everything. Yeah, 100%.
So the book that you've written with Rosie, Broken Brains, which we did mention, a lot of the stigma around mental health is that because it's not visible, often it's misunderstood. You've come from one side of the coin, which is physically you've had things cut out of your head.
Yeah.
And then Rosie is obviously from a very different perspective. What did you learn from her? Because there would be a big section of the population, which I think understandably, it doesn't mean it's right, but if they've been through something like what you've been through, would see someone with mental health problems and go, oh, please, I've had bits cut out of my brain. Don't talk to me. What did you learn?
I remember when we first started writing the book, Rosie said she felt an enormous amount of pressure because she felt like she had to prove that mental ill health could be as serious. I think once you read the book, I think I've had the easier run. There's no question. There is no question. And I don't think anyone who's ever had really significant mental ill health challenges would deny that I would have another 3 or 4 surgeries before I had to relive those few months before the first one. No question I would, because what my brain was doing to me from a mental health perspective, and the fear and it wasn't a life those few months. And I'm someone who has generally had quite good mental health, and so I hadn't experienced something like that before. And I hope I never have to go back there. That was awful. And the physical recoveries have been rubbish. Don't get me wrong, totally rubbish. Don't recommend having a brain tumour. But that was harder. And partly I think it was harder because I felt like I couldn't make anyone understand quite how hard it was. And, you know, I've watched it through my working life, through my friends and family, to the point that I've said to people in my life when we've been worried about someone we love who's going through really serious period of mental illness, if you need to pretend that it's cancer to take it seriously, do that, because they deserve all the love and all the support in the world right now. And if you can't get your head to the point that this is as serious, then trick yourself, because the worst thing would be is if you can't give that person that support, because then they end up more alone. And it's only going to make the outcomes worse.
So I guess this question might be too simplistic, because it's a whole gamut of things we've talked about. But who is the book for, and what do you hope people get out of it?
I don't think it's simplistic at all, but I'm going to be simplistic in the answer and say it's kind of for everyone.
Yeah.
I wanted to write this book because I felt really lonely, during all different points of my illness, and I wanted to be there for people who were going through the same thing. But I also wanted everyone around them to understand, and Rosie wanted, I think, the same thing. So I hope it makes people who have been unwell with any kind of combination of illnesses to feel a bit more seen and a bit validated, and for the people who love them and care about them to understand it a bit better, because I think that's all anyone wants. And I think when you're unwell, there's just so much good intentions flying around from everyone. And yet a lot of the time we're working at cross purposes and we do silly things or say silly things or don't quite get it right. And so I hope this just creates a little bit more understanding.
And I hope people that read it also appreciate just how, and brave is a word thrown around a lot, but quite how brave it is to share your personal story publicly, because it is the most private pain anyone will ever experience, and now you're allowing other people to learn about it to make their world better. And I think it's a really hard thing to do, and I'm sure there's days where you're like, what have I done? And days where you're like, I'm glad I did this, and it's a roller coaster. So I think people need to think about that it's a really hard thing to put yourself out there when you read this. For you, everyone always talks about how when they get sick, it changes their outlook, it changes their, you were obviously incredibly professionally motivated before you got sick. You had a little boy and everything. You had, family plans and everything. Has it given you some new profound outlook on life, or is it just changed like things in a small? Is it that profound moment that you expected it to be, or has it changed it in other ways?
I don't think I've had some profound moment. I don't think I became a better person, or I'm not giving more to charity. I'm not doing the right things, guys. No, that's I don't think I did. You know how people talk about that experience of like they get given a diagnosis and they're like, I'm going to quit my job and go and live on a desert island and do that. I think what I realized was, oh my God, I had it really good.
Yeah.
Like I just had this obsession with, I just want to live this life. Like I've got a really good one. Like I have lucked out and I just want to be here and doing the work that I'm doing and married to Jeremy and bringing up Ruffy, and I just want to be around for that, and I don't need anything else. I don't need to change anything. I just want to keep getting to do it. And I still feel grateful is not quite the right word, I think, but I still feel almost like disbelieving that so far so good and we're pulling it off, because I remember the night before going into hospital and sleeping with Ruffy, who was 2, on the couch, and just, I'm not religious, but just thinking like I will do anything just to be here to watch him grow up. And he'll be 10 in a month, and so I'm here for a lot of it.
And just before we go, what have they said going forward? You just have to monitor it. Is there a chance it will come back, or are they're feeling confident it won't? How does it present?
There's definitely a chance. Yeah. So it's because they've had to leave a little bit in there. It's pretty small. In fact, it's about the size of half a grain of rice now. I have half a grain of rice sitting in a little jar on my bedside table to remind me that it's there, but it's nothing to worry about. It's not a big deal.
How do you cut it in half?
Yeah, it was quite hard actually. Yeah. But you can. No, it's not cooked. Then it'll go off.
But I thought
unswell.
I know I'm getting caught up on the wrong bits, but like, how did you just get a knife and because it would have pinged everywhere?
Yeah, but it was only one. I didn't cut lots at the same time.
You would have had a few cracks at it.
Yeah, no, it took a few. It take a few goes.
Well, I hope that everything continues to go from strength to strength. We're so thankful that you've written the book. We both can't wait to read it, as well as everyone listening, I'm sure, and hopefully maybe chat to Rosie about it as well, because I'm sure her experience has been different, if not some similar bits to your journey. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you
You're
for
an
everything.
absolute wonderful human.
Yeah.
So are you. I would not be here without you.